So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's SAP TechEd workshop. My name is Julia Russo, and I'm part of the SAP Community team. I'm your host during this call, and our topic for this session is Cloud Native Development with SAP HANA. And we are going to record this session so you can rewatch it anytime. Our speakers for today are Thomas Young and Rich Hallman, and they will discuss how to use the latest capabilities of SAP Cloud Application Programming Model and SAP Business Application Studio to perform state-of-the-art development with SAP HANA. Now, before I hand over, I would like to make you aware of the SAP Community, an external-facing platform where you can connect to other members and follow the SAP TechEd and SAP HANA Cloud Tech to stay up to date. So if you have any questions, please use the chat button down below and raise your questions there, or unmute yourself and then you can ask your questions directly. Also during the presentation or after the presentation. So Thomas, Rich, thanks for joining. The stage is yours.
All right, so welcome everybody to this repeat of DAT 160. This was a hands-on session that Rich and I originally gave at SAP TechEd this year, in an effort to allow more people to participate with this hands-on session. We're repeating it now as part of this community session. So for today's session, it's going to be predominantly hands-on. I'm going to do the exercises. You are welcome to follow along with me, although the opportunity here today is really for you to be able to ask questions, and we encourage you as we go here to speak up, ask questions. How did we decide we want to do this? That they have to put them in the chat, or at least speak up in the chat, and then Julia, you can bring them on to ask their question, or how do you want this to work, Julia?
Yes, I can collect all of the questions and then we can address all of the questions after you have finished, or we can do it right away.
No. Do it as we go. Yes.
Okay, right away.
Yes,
okay,
we want this to be an interactive session, so we want people to be able to ask questions as we go.
Yes.
So I will also put in the chat for anyone that wants to follow along. Here's the link to the GitHub repo where you will find all the instructions. You can use this to follow along. But there's also, as you'll see here once we get into it, there are step-by-step instructions with screenshots, and there are videos of each exercise as well linked in to the GitHub repo. It'll take you over to YouTube of how to perform each individual step. But as I said, the opportunity here today is for us to do this together interactively, for you to ask questions as we go. So what are we going to cover here today? In the introduction, you got a little sense of the technology, but the idea here is how do we build a modern cloud application, something that we deploy to the SAP Business Technology Platform, and an application that is designed to leverage the capabilities of SAP HANA Cloud, that use SAP's modern programming model, the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, and also allows us to use Fiori tools to build the user interface. So we're not going to go super deep into any one of those things, but we're going to see how all the pieces work together. And probably most importantly, we're going to do all the development in the SAP Business Application Studio. So the most recent development tools experience that SAP offers. So for many of you, maybe this is the first time that you've gone through something in the Business Application Studio, or maybe it's the first time you've done some portion of this. The HANA Cloud portions, for instance, are very new. We want to give you a real end-to-end view of what the entire development process is like here. Now, we will be doing all this using the SAP Business Technology Platform trial. So that means you can do this in your own personal account, completely free of charge. All the components that we're going to use, from the development tools to HANA Cloud capabilities to the cloud application programming model, all available in the trial. All browser-based, no local installations needed to do any of this exercise. So pretty easy to get started there. Now, before I get into the exercises themselves, I do want to talk about the prerequisites. Now, I'm not going to go through the prerequisites because, for instance, creating a trial account, I already have one, and I'm not going to walk through the process of creating a trial account itself. That would dominate too much of the time that we have together here today. But I did, if you are completely new to, say, the trial, I have linked to a central tutorial that walks you through the process of how to get set up on the SAP Business Technology Platform trial. And okay. And there are videos as well for each of these prerequisite steps that will walk you through if you have not set up a trial account before. Need the audio to play there, sorry. There are videos as well that walk you through the setup of the trial. Although the video does have the old name, we've updated the written tutorials to the new name. But the most important thing is get your business technology platform trial, which, if you aren't aware, this is the trial homepage. I will put that link in the chat as well. And from here, we can go directly to the Business Application Studio. I could just open that in another tab. I actually already have it open, running over here, ready to go. But there's a couple things we're going to want to do first. So let's go ahead and go into our trial account, because in addition to just having the trial account set up, we are also going to need to make sure that you have HANA Cloud, and HANA Cloud is not immediately available in a trial when you set it up. It's like an additional service that you get with the free trial, but you do have to go in and provision it the first time. So you're going to go into your sub account level, and then you're going to go down into your space, and then you're going to see this option on the left-hand side for SAP HANA Cloud. When you click on that, it's going to show you if you already have a HANA Cloud trial instance. Now, if you had a brand new trial, you obviously wouldn't have an instance. I have one because mine has existed for a while. And you could start the process of creating a HANA Cloud instance just by clicking Create Database. It takes a few minutes to provision the server because you are getting your own private HANA instance. So this isn't like the older trial where it was a central instance and everybody was on there and you just had a schema and you were sharing the system with everyone else. We're really giving you a full HANA database instance, 2 CPUs, 30 gigs of memory, 120 gigs of storage, and it's private to you. Okay. So before you would attempt to do this hands-on workshop, you would want a business technology platform trial account. I would imagine many of you probably already do have that, I hope. You do need to set up the Business Application Studio for development. If you've never used the Business Application Studio before, there are some getting started steps that you can go through in this other tutorial, but I also imagine many of you already have the Business Application Studio set up, and there's not a whole lot to this. It's basically telling you now all you have to do is go to the home page, click on the Business Application Studio button if you've already got a trial account, and yes, accept the agreement, and then it has a little tutorial that'll walk you through, and they recommend that you bookmark the page. If that's all you've done, that's fine. You're in good spot to do the rest of this tutorial. We'll walk through the rest in details. And the last prerequisite step is the one that I just showed you, which is create your HANA Cloud instance. Now, if you don't have a HANA Cloud instance, as I said, it can take a few minutes to start up. If you're starting it right now for the first time, then maybe best to just watch along with what we're going to do with the exercises, and then come back and try to do them later. Because like we said, there are videos of each of the steps, and this session is being recorded that you can refer back to. But that brings us up to the prerequisites. We're ready to really get started here. And maybe before we jump in to the first exercise, which is setting up our development environment, pause for a second, see if there are any questions.
No, not yet.
See any questions in the chat? Okay.
Not yet.
Then let's go ahead and start with exercise 0, which is getting started, which is just going to check a few things for us. So we're going to want to start off here just to make sure that everything is good. You're going to want to come here to our SAP HANA Cloud page, and we're going to want to click this Manage HANA Cloud. There's not a lot we can do. There's this actions icon, but it's really just going to open other windows. And what I usually do is I just go Manage HANA Cloud, and the HANA Cloud Central management tool will then open in a separate tab. And there's 2 reasons that I want you to go here, even if you have an existing HANA Cloud instance. The first, it's important to note, the HANA Cloud trial shuts down each night. And this is to save costs. So if you aren't using your instance, that it shuts down. It doesn't delete. All your content is persisted. We just do a shutdown, right? So we're not, incurring hardware costs for instances that aren't being used. So each day you do need to come in to this tool, and right here where it says stop, if my system was stopped, this would say start. So you would just go ahead and come in here and start. And then it takes, a minute, maybe a minute and a half to start up, and it will go to this running state. But as it's starting, the screen does not automatically refresh. So some people are thrown off by that. They might sit here for 10 minutes saying, it's been sitting there in starting status for 10 minutes. You have to manually refresh the screen to check the status. So that's probably the most common error that we see when people are doing this tutorial or other tutorials, is they forget to start their HANA instance. They come back in the next day, they pick up where they left off doing the tutorial, and they go to use the development environment, which works fine at first until you go to deploy your content into the HANA database, and then you get some error message about the HANA instance being unreachable, and it is unreachable because it's not running. So always, this is the first place to come check, is come to your SAP HANA Cloud Central and just make sure that the instance is running. The other thing that I want everybody to double check is during the provisioning, there were some options that it asked you. And unfortunately, the default option on one of them is to deny all IP addresses except SAP Cloud Platform on external connections. The problem with choosing that, even though it says except SAP Cloud Platform, is that doesn't actually include the Business Application Studio. And in order to do development from the Business Application Studio or any other local development, if you want to use VS Code or you want to connect from, ODBC or JDBC from your local laptop, you either have to change this to allow all IP addresses or allow specific IP addresses, but then you have to maintain each IP address or each range that you want to allow. So for the purposes of the trial, I generally recommend that people just go ahead and say allow all IP addresses, and that's going to avoid problems connecting from external sources like the Business Application Studio. And what you'll get there is an error message. If you have this set wrong, if you have this set to deny all IP addresses, you're going to get a similar error message to when your system's not running, But instead of, I forget the exact verbiage, but instead of it being unable to connect, you'll get like connection rejected, where, you know, it's like, I was able to make a connection, but then the server said, no, I'm not allowed. And that's what you'll get here at this point. So just make sure that your system is running and that you have allow all IP addresses set.
Thomas, we already have one
question in the chat.
Here. Yeah.
Okay.
Should I address the question?
Okay. I'll read the question.
Yeah. Okay.
How SAP HANA Cloud differs from SAP HANA Schemas and HDI Container Service. Yeah, the SAP HANA Schemas and HDI Container Service is actually the older HANA as a service. And it's actually a completely different version of HANA. The HANA as a service that you get with that service broker is HANA 2.0. It's basically the same version that's available in the on-premise. Whereas if you were to look at the technical version of HANA Cloud, it is HANA 4.0. So there are functionality differences between the two. HANA Cloud really replaces HANA as a service long-term. HANA as a service is still supported for productive customers, but I wouldn't recommend starting new on it today. I definitely recommend starting on HANA Cloud. And if you're talking specifically about the trial, the HANA as a service or the SAP HANA Schemas and HDI Containers service in the trial is that shared landscape where there's one central HANA instance and everybody's sharing it, and all you get is one schema or one HDI container in that instance, and you don't have complete administrative control of the instance. The HANA Cloud gives you complete administrative control, and it is a private instance for you. So from a trial experience, it's a much better experience. Plus, you know, it's a newer version of HANA, and it's what we really recommend everybody using in the for any cloud development moving forward. Okay. There's a question. How does there's several questions here. For SAP ECC on-premise scenario, not S4, is it possible provisioning CDS HANA views to SCP? I would apply a cap RESTful model with a real case in my company. I'm not sure what you're wanting to do there. You want to create a HANA view in HANA Cloud that connects to your ECC on premise? I think for any sort of that scenario, you'd replicate the data to the cloud. You wouldn't connect in real time to the on premise. I mean, there are different remote data connection options there using smart data integration, using data lakes, using replication services, but you're going to want to look at those remote data capabilities that are built into HANA Cloud. That's a bit outside the scope of anything that we plan to talk about today. How does storage space on HANA Cloud scale? Well, you have the ability when you edit the instance. Now, this is a trial instance, so I don't have the ability to change it. I'm at my maximum. But in a productive instance, if you want to add more storage or more memory or more CPUs, you come into the edit screen and you would increase the amounts, and the system would scale to that new amount. But the trial, being free, is basically has a set limit, and the default is right at that limit. Oh my, now the questions are coming in fast and furious here. Is it possible to add this Hana Cloud DB as a secondary DB in on-premise application server, ABAP NetWeaver 752? Probably technically you could, given the latency. I don't know if that would be a good technical decision to do that, I think we would recommend, as I said, look at the data lake functionality, the smart data integration functionality, the replication concepts to move data to your HANA Cloud instance in a performant manner. I don't think a secondary database connection doing I would think the latency and the security setup there, that wouldn't be advised. Oh, okay. So how could I resolve privilege issues on SAP HANA Database Explorer? Well, I guess I would have to know more details. What kind of privilege issue? I'm sorry, that's probably too broad for me to be able to answer. Are you having problems launching the Database Explorer, doing something in the Database Explorer? We'd have to know more. What's the biggest difference between HANA version 2 and HANA version 4? Well, HANA version 4 is for HANA Cloud. That's probably the biggest difference. It includes new capabilities like the data lake integration, and it has some cloud-specific functionality, like being able to import data from S3 data store, things like that. There is a complete set of release notes from last year when HANA Cloud came out that really told the Delta. I mean, that would be a whole probably hour-long presentation covering the Delta features of HANA Cloud, which we don't have time to do here today. Which version of SAP HANA in BTP is closer in features and development methods to on-premise? Well, probably the HANA as the service is closer to HANA on-premise because they're the same version level. They're both 2.0 SPS 5 essentially, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Because then you're intentionally developing against an older release. If you just want to develop something in HANA Cloud that has compatibility with on-premise, you can do that as well. You can limit, say for instance, in the HDI container, you can tell it to target the older release, and then it will limit the functionality you have available if that's your concern. I would still recommend using HANA Cloud in the cloud platform for development. I still have doubts about how to deploy our CAP projects to the final users. Is there best practice? Well, the best practice is to package your project as an MTA, a multi-target application, using the MBT, the multi-target application archive builder. That's all integrated into the Business Application Studio, and then you can use the either CF deploy from the command line to actually deploy it into the target space, or many people build a CI/CD pipeline to deploy. But that's also a little bit outside the scope of anything that we're going to cover today. But essentially, the multi-target application archive, same thing that we've been using for a while. Can SLT be provisioned using replication task? I'm sorry, I don't really know much of anything about SLT or replication task. That's way outside the scope of today's workshop. I want to explore table data from Database Explorer or for running SQL command. I always get a privilege issue error. I don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you there. I would have to know more about what is the privilege error. Who are you logged on as? Are you trying to access an HDI container as the DB admin user? This is probably a question better asked in the community so that there can be some back and forth there to look at your particular situation. Okay. A question. After I start getting a new version of HANA Cloud is available, how do I get this new version? well, you come to the same screen that we're on here in the Actions menu, and you choose Upgrade. And wait 30 seconds to a minute, and then your system is upgraded to the newest version. Options grayed out for me because I'm up to date. I upgraded it last week, like on Thursday or Friday or something like that. Okay, I think I'm kind of caught up there. Wow, lots of questions. Let's continue with the exercises at this point. That's what I figured my session has timed out. Because the next step, now that we know that we have our HANA system running, is we want to start into our development environment, which is the Business Application Studio. So I have the Business Application Studio running here, and I already have 2 development spaces. I have one for Cloud Application Programming Model, and I have one for HANA Native Development. And in the trial, you're only allowed 2 spaces, and only one can be running at a time. So I can't really have this set up to go and show you the starting process. But if you don't have a dev space, it's all here in the exercises. And let me maybe walk you through the screenshots here, because if I didn't already have a dev space, or 2, I could say create dev space. Grayed out for me because I've already reached my limit. But if you don't have your 2, or if you don't have the one you need for this workshop, you want to go ahead and create a new dev space. Give it a name. I said HANA DAT 160, but really the name doesn't matter so much. I've actually gone with more generic names here as I've done multiple tutorials. One for CAP and one for HANA. This is only for your purposes to help you know what you have here in your list. It doesn't impact anything about your development itself. But this part is important. You want to choose your dev space type, and you have multiple choices of Fiori, Mobile, HANA, Cloud Business Application, Basic. And for this workshop, you're going to want to choose SAP Cloud Business Application. Okay, and that's going to bring in the required tools, which include the CDS tools. And then you're going to see additional SAP extensions. And this is where you're going to want to go ahead and check and add the HANA tools into the space. And what that's going to allow us to do is have a single dev space designed for CAP development, which will also include Fiori development, because that comes standard in the CAP dev space as well. And we're manually adding the HANA tools into it as well. Unfortunately, right now, if you choose SAP HANA native application, you get the HANA tools, but you cannot add in the CAP or CDS tools. So if you want to do this full stack end-to-end development, then you really have to choose Cloud Business Application, the CAP dev space type, and manually add in the HANA tools. Now, if you don't have, or if you already created your space and it didn't include the HANA tools, then while it's stopped, you can click the little edit icon and it will bring this screen back up where you can add them back in, where you can choose these additional extensions. So even if you created it a while ago and maybe you didn't include the HANA tools initially, you can just go in and edit that and add the HANA tools to your existing dev space. Okay. And then you would click create dev space, and it takes 30 seconds, a minute to create, and then you have to start the space. And that also takes a minute or 2, which is why I tried to have everything ready to go here so we didn't have to sit and wait while it started up. Then you just go ahead and click on the dev space and it will launch. And actually, ignore this. It's just got my last stuff that I was working on. I will close that. And if you are new to a dev space, this is what you're going to see. Basically an empty workspace and the welcome screen. Or if you have something left over from before, if you're doing this exercise, you do have something left over from before, you can just do like I did and do a close workspace, and it gets you back to a completely clean workspace. Okay. So question, what kind of dev space do I need to create? I think we talked about that just now, that you want the SAP Cloud Business Application dev space type. Okay. And question, how long does it take to create the HANA DB? Still in creating state in my case. Definitely takes several minutes. Got to press the refresh button there, like Rich said. Depending upon what region, US versus EU, I think it takes a little bit longer in the EU region because there are more instances there. It might take up to like 10 minutes. US region, creating a new one. I did one, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and it took maybe 2 or 3 minutes. It also depends on how many people are doing it right now as well, how much load there is. We can now import zip file, but when is the export zip not using Git? I believe you can export a zip of your project. I'll have to, we'll come back to that in a second once I get a project in here. All right, so we have our empty workspace. Now, when you first come into a new workspace, it's probably not going to have your Cloud Foundry target set yet. It's probably going to stay down here in the bottom. The organization space in Cloud Foundry has not been set. Now we can go ahead and set it, and then everything else we do, it won't have to ask us. Otherwise, the first time we do something that needs to talk to Cloud Foundry, it will ask you. But let me just go ahead and do this. I'm just going to click the set. Now, when it first comes up, it's probably going to ask you for the API endpoint. It probably defaults to the right API endpoint, but if you want to double check it, come back to the Cloud Platform Cockpit and just go to your account and then into the sub account. And right here, you'll find the API endpoint. That's the URL that it's asking for when it wants your API endpoint. Now, I've already put it in. That's why it's remembering it for me. It didn't even ask me. And then it asked you for your email address that you use to register your trial account and the password that you use to create your trial account. It's remembering my credentials from the last time I logged in. That's why it didn't ask me that. Then it wants your organization. Now, you probably only have one organization. I'm getting a mixture here. You know, I've got some productive organizations. I've had multiple trial accounts over the years and, you know, resetting things internally SAP. But if you need to know what your trial org, it's also in the screen here at subdomain. You'll see it up here at the top in the navigation as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And then it's going to ask me for my space. You probably in a trial only have one space as well, and it should be named dev unless you manually created additional spaces. You want to be sure to target the space where you have set up your HANA Cloud instance. It will be space specific. Okay, so it says my org and space has been set. You could trust that it's good, or I can actually come here and I can open a terminal and I can just do a CF services. And you see automatically it's using my credentials. It's targeting that org and space. So I don't have to do a CF target or a CF login. It's remembering that for me and injecting it into the command. Now you may not have near as much. You know, I've created other tutorials and things, so I've got lots of services out here, but that just confirms that we're connected to Cloud Foundry good there. All right. That's the end of the prerequisites. We're ready to start with exercise 1 now. How are we doing here on questions? Are there
some new questions came in? Yeah.
So there's a request for more tutorials. Okay. Should we do different config for using TypeScript? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what you're looking for there. I mean, there's not a dev space or tutorial or tooling specific to TypeScript in the Business Application Studio, if that's what you're asking. Question, is a government region also in place? Well, I guess that depends what government. I mean, the SAP Cloud Platform, now SAP Business Technology Platform, is available in some private hosting instances and for some government entities, and it varies from region and government requirements. So I would encourage you to talk to your SAP sales team, your account executives, to find out what's available for your specific government requirements. I couldn't begin to answer that. Is there any path to buy non-trial capacity for at-home hobby projects? This is focused on enterprise customers only. Well, I would encourage you to use the trial for that sort of thing. Today, no, there really isn't sort of anything in between. You have to be, I mean, you can go through the SAP store, but you're going to enter into a contract with SAP. It's not exactly a hobbyist kind of account. You know, that's something that, according to Jürgen Mueller at TechEd, that we're hoping to add through some sort of free tier or freemium tier with pay-as-you-go capabilities to add on additional services. Jürgen Mueller at TechEd keynote talked about that coming in the near future, but I don't have any more details that I could share on that at this time. What's the best way to recommended way for reading data from multiple SAP systems on premise to cloud apps, for example, to read, do some calcs, and show a Fiori dashboard? The answer is it depends. It depends how much data you're reading, what your requirements are for accessing it. I mean, there are different options. You could call an OData service through the Cloud Connector and consume that data via an OData service. Often, if you're just wanting to visualize that data, you would call an OData service interactively. You could use enterprise messaging, so that when data is changed, it also notifies an application on the cloud side, or even uses that to partially store some of the data or extended version of the data. Or you could replicate that data somehow into the cloud, or use the data lake capabilities of HANA, and then maybe keep a closely synchronized copy of the data. That could be more useful if you want to do aggregations on large amounts of the data in the cloud without going back to on-premise. So it really depends upon your use case and requirements, which option is right. I don't think there's any one magic bullet there. Okay. All right, I think we're ready to jump into our first exercise, which is to create our project. So from the welcome screen, and if you accidentally closed it, you can always come back here to help welcome, and it will bring back the welcome screen. But from the welcome screen, we have this start from template, and we're going to go ahead and use that option. And it's going to give us the choice of several templates. I'm going to make my screen a little larger there. You can see here we have a plain multi-target application. We have a HANA database project. We have a CAP project. We have a Fiori application. Well, we want to create something that does all these. That is a multi-target application that has HANA database modules in it, that has Fiori modules in it, and is a CAP project. And in order to do that combination of all of them, you choose the CAP project. And you'll see later, we're able to add other specific elements into it, like HANA, like Fiori. And as part of the CAP project, we will get a multi-target application, or at least the option in the wizard to do that. So let's go with CAP. And we do want to put it, we'll just keep it here in the default path, home user projects. That would be the recommendation. And it's going to ask me for a name of my project. And actually, I'm going to check this real quick. Projects Yes, I have a completed version out here. So I'm going to use a little different name than what, if you're following along, what you would do. You could use DAT160. I've already created a project named DAT160 because I tested it last week and I kept the project around in case I want to show you the finished project if anything would go wrong. So I'm just going to call this DAT, let's do 1601. Okay. This workshop is designed to use Node.js, not Java. So we're going to stick with Node.js. And you see some of these optional things that we can add to our project. Like, do I want to include CI/CD pipeline integration? Like if I want to automate the deployment to production or run automated testing. Yes, I will go ahead and include that feature. Do I want to include HANA development? Yes, I do. Definitely for this workshop in particular. Do I want it to be an MTA that is deployable to the cloud platform? Yes, I do. Now, other options, Jupyter base CAP notebook. That's a relatively new feature. We're not going to use it for this workshop. Cloud Foundry native development. If you want to be able to do a CF push to a space rather than package as an MTA and deploy the entire thing, you can choose this option. I'm not going to use that myself. I'm going to leave that unselected. And I will go ahead and throw in the basic sample files as part of this tutorial. We'll start with the sample files and then build on top of them. Let's just go ahead and finish that up, and that will generate. It tells me my project has been generated. What would I like to do? Yes, please do open in my workspace. And that will reopen in just a second here, and it will pull the project in. So there's a question. Some templates are missing compared to the web IDE. Are these still being brought over, like master detail CRUD, for instance? Well, I think what you'll see later when we use the Fiori, we're now using the Fiori tools templates, and they may not be exactly a one-to-one match to the web IDE because the web IDE also contains some freestyle templates. But I think you actually will find that you have a wider range of templates available, and they are newer versions of the templates that support Odata v4 compared to the web IDE. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one, but it is the go forward recommended set of templates. All right. So what you see here, this project's been created. We have an MTA YAML and a package JSON. These are really important. We'll come back to those in a minute. But we have SRV folder. That's going to be our OData service. We have a CDS file that defines our OData service that was generated because we chose samples. And we have our DB folder, and it's got a data model CDS. Right now we're creating one entity. One database table would be generated out of this called books. Now, if for some reason you open, if you right mouse click, open in graphical modeler, or if the default opened in the graphical modeler for you, and you don't want that, you can, of course, right mouse click and say open with code editor, or you can come down here and open your preferences and turn the graphical modeler on and off. But I think it's there under CDS. No. Yeah, graphical modeler as default. So when I took the screenshots and ran through this workshop originally back in December for TechEd, the graphical modeler was default on, but we wanted to do all the flow of the exercises, not using the graphical modeler, but the code base editor. But since then, the default has changed, but does give you the ability to switch back and forth here if you want. Okay. So if we just exploring a little here, we have the CAP model and services view. this is a pretty nice tool here in the Business Application Studio that shows you all of your, shows you your data model, no external models, and our catalog service, that's our OData service, and there's our books. We'll even allow you to navigate directly to things, and as we'll see later, open the code editor, you can navigate to it. And you can even create the UI directly from here, although we're not ready to do that yet because we're not far enough along in our project. All right, now the Cloud Application Programming Model, its main configuration file is here in the package JSON. And we're gonna have to make a couple of important changes to it. So first of all, I wanna go ahead and just up my version here on the HANA client. I also know I'm not going to need the dev dependencies, SQLite, because we're not going to use SQLite. We're going to go directly to HANA Cloud and do all our deployments there. So I'll just go ahead and take that out. But I know in the CDS section, I need to change from SQL, which would be SQLite, to say deploy to HANA. And one other thing that we need to do, not because, because we're targeting HANA Cloud, we want to, when we compile our CDS sources, we want them to compile to HDB table and HDB view, not HDB CDS. HDB CDS is actually not supported anymore in HANA Cloud. So we can make that configuration change here just by adding a HANA section. And then we can say deploy format, and no, it doesn't. HDB table. There we are. I'll save that. Now, I'm going to add a couple of scripts here, optionally, that will help with things. I like having these little reusable scripts that we can run from the command line. For instance, I'm going to add a build script for when we want to do the CDS build, kind of like in the web IDE, we used to right mouse click and say CDS build. Well, now we can do it from the command line. And it's just going to be the same thing here. I'm just going to say CDS build. But I'm also going to add a HANA command, and this is going to help us deploy to HANA. I'm just going to say CDS deploy to HANA, and then the name of my HDI container, and mine already exists. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a 1 on the end of it. Then I'm going to add auto undeploy. Okay. And I'll save that. So now I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't mess anything up, but I think I have adjusted the package JSON just fine. And at this point, what we can do is we can go ahead and open the terminal, or you can come here to the npm scripts and you could run them from here. I like just going to the terminal and running things here. But in the root of the project, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do an npn install. And that's going to install these dependencies like CDS itself, Express, and the HANA client. So that's going to install those libraries, those modules into our project. So that's what actually comes here into this node modules folder. Now we're going to want to build the project. And up to this point, we've got the sample stuff. So we can go ahead and we can just do a npn run build, and that's going to run our build script, which is just going to be CDS build. And I could have ran CDS build from the command line as well. Doesn't really make a difference, but I like having those as npn scripts since those are callable pretty easily from the command line. And what you'll see here is I built the project, and that took our design time artifacts like our data model CDS, and it created this gen folder and put the output in the gen folder. So for instance, it created HDB view and HDB table for our entity, and it took our CSV file and generated that as well. So we have artifacts that could now be sent into the HANA database. So in order to do that, now I want to point out, you might notice there is this SAP HANA projects view. And it has the ability to also send stuff into the database. You can make a database connection and you can deploy it in the database. Unfortunately, it has a real problem with the way the default folder structure works. This gen folder, and when you do a CDS build, it wipes out the gen folder. So we could use this tool to deploy to the HANA database. But then every time we do it, we have to come back here and reset it up. And I'll show you what this looks like. Now, there's a way to work around this, and I've got some other tutorials that are available out there that show you how to work around this. It means making more changes to the package JSON and changing the MTA YAML. For the purpose of this workshop, I just left things the way they are, but I want to show you this. So for instance, here I'm saying bind, and it's showing me all my HANA HDI container instances that exist. So I could bind it to an existing one, but I'm actually going to say, now I want to create a new HDI container instance. And it's asking me, well, what do you want to name it? I'm just going to shorten that up, DAT160. And I'm going to put 1 on the end because, like I said, I've done this already. And I'll hit enter. And what it's doing now is it's actually doing the CF create service and setting up the service keys and all that stuff for you. And then it's going to create an environment file that we can use to deploy into the database. Then while we wait, and this does take just a minute to run, let me check here. See, do you have any exercise for post and put request for relational table like association to 1? I do. Well, this is running. Let me go here to the HANA Open SAP Cloud 2020 sample. And this has some examples of that, and actually not using an association, but using a composition. Because if you want to do a deep insert, you should use a composition, not an association. But that is something that I detail here in this code sample. And we did a video on the hands-on SAP dev, which is linked in here as well. The YouTube series that shows how to do that. And I think I even have, test, maybe not here. I did that in the video. I show how to create a test runner and do the put post. All right. Well, I was answering that question. It finished up creating my service. You can see now it's bound. And what I can do is I can come here and I can just hit the little deploy icon, and you'll see that it will install the HDI deployer, and then it's connecting to the HANA database and it's deploying my artifacts into the HANA database. You might say, well, that's really nice. I even have the ability here to now say open HDI container, and it would open in the database explorer. But the problem with this, like I said, with the default structure, is if I change something in my CDS file, and then I rerun the CDS build, npn run build, and it reruns the CDS build, recreates the gen folder completely, and when it does that, it wipes out all of our configuration. So you'd have to do this bind again. You don't have to recreate the HDI container, but you do have to rebind it each time, which is a little bit of a pain. So for the purposes of this workshop, we're not going to use that approach. We're going to use the CDS deploy to HANA, which is going to do basically the same thing. So we're just going to come here and we're going to say npn run HANA, and that's going to run the same deploy command. It's connecting to the HANA database here. creating a service key the first time. And now it's deploying to the database. Now there's nothing new to deploy because I didn't actually change anything, but now we're good and connected to the database, and that won't get overridden each time you do a CDS build. Now, if you want to open the Database Explorer without having this nice, now we can't just click the Open Database Explorer either because it's not bound. But what we can do here is there's an additional little tool to interact with HANA from the command line. So I can just say install globally. Oh, sorry. Npn install globally. That's the -G HANA CLI. And give that a second to install from npn. And this tool allows us to do things like I can do system info. That's going to show me information about my HANA Cloud instance that I'm connected to. Like there's the version number. That's when it was started, how much memory it's allocated, things like that. It also lets us look at like inside our HDI container. So if I say HANA Cloud tables, well, I have one table, my bookshop books, the one sample table that we created. But if we want to do more, like go into the Database Explorer, I can do HANA CLI, open DBX, and there it will open the Database Explorer for me in another tab. Oh, there's a question about please post the GitHub link. Yeah, we posted that earlier, but I think if you join late, you don't get to see the earlier chat. But for anybody that has joined late, there's the link to the GitHub repo where the exercises are that we're going through. Okay. So once we're in the Database Explorer, there we are. If you're fresh in here, I've got some other stuff in here, but I can just say add database. And then I can search DAT1601. And I'll go ahead and add that to the Database Explorer. And now I can come here and I can view the tables, which there should just be the one table, bookshop books. And I can do things like I can look at, well, what's the table structure look like? Or I can even say open data. And remember, this is all from the sample content that the wizard created for us, but just walks us through the process of how to get our project deployed into the database. Oh, when we clicked on bind instance for the first time, where did we specify to use SAP HANA Cloud? You didn't have to, because what it did, you specified your space, and the tool is smart enough to go out there and look in your space and see what you have. And it's looking for a HANA Cloud instance, because it's basically, if I do CF services, you can see that I have a HANA Cloud trial instance. So it's just going out there and it's looking to see if I have a service for HANA Cloud or HANA Cloud trial and targeting that automatically. Now, if you have more than one instance in your target space, it will pop up and ask you which one you want to target. And if it finds both HANA Cloud and HANA as a service instances in your space, it will ask you as well. But because I only have one in my target space, I only have a HANA Cloud trial, it just uses that automatically. I don't have to tell it. All right. So that's walked us through the basic process of a CAP project deploying to HANA. And I think at this point, we're ready to do some, if I can find my spot, there we are. We're ready to do some real development here. I want to get to the right spot in the exercise, so I can cut and paste. Oh, we already created a project. Sorry, I want to go to exercise 2. There we are. And what do we want to do? We want to get away from using the sample stuff and really create our own. So let's come here first, just so we don't get any nasty syntax errors. Let's go ahead and comment out from the Odata service, because we're going to be breaking it for a minute. And we don't need this CSV file anymore, because we're going to get rid of the sample content. There we are. And one thing we do want to do is we want to make our stuff language independent. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here. And actually I want to create a folder, i18n, and then name my file i18n.properties. This is something that CAP will look for automatically and use text strings from this, and that way we don't have to hard code any text strings in our data definitions or our OData services. So in other words, I can just refer to PO_ID and it will pull in purchase order ID automatically. And it defaults to English, but I could add multiple languages here as well. And then it would, depending on the logon language for my OData service, for instance, pull the correct description for the correct language. So just by adding the i18n makes those text strings available. And then you're going to see here in a second, we're going to use those text strings. So I'm going to clear out my data model. And first of all, we're going to put in this using block. Okay. These are reusable constructs provided by the Cloud Application Programming Model, like currency, like CUID. So currency would be a reusable entity. CUID is a reusable type. It's very similar if you come from the ABAP background. We have the data dictionary and you use or reuse an SAP delivered type or structure. This is the same sort of thing. SAP's pre-built these types and these structures, these entities into the Cloud Application Programming Model, and you can inherit from them, you can enhance them, and you can use them in your own entities for more consistency and reuse. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. You'll see in a minute how we use some of these. Okay. Now, I want to start, I'm going to have this currency entity, and I don't only want to reuse the SAP standard currency entity. Oh, I didn't get the whole thing on a cut and paste there, did I? I want to extend it. So this is how you can take standard SAP entities and add your own columns to them. I'm just saying extend SAP Common Currencies, and I'm adding 3 additional columns to it. Maybe I'll pause here for a second. There was a question in the chat. One issue here on exercise 1.3 step 2, npn run build. I don't get the messages regarding the gen directory and no directory in the directory tree. What am I missing? Are you sure? I would check your package JSON and make sure that your build script is CDS build. Maybe you put the build script as the wrong command. That's the most likely thing I would think. And you can, instead of running an npm script, you can just issue CDS space build from the command line as well. That should do the same thing. What did I do wrong if I don't see the SAP HANA projects on the left side in the Business Application Studio? That means that, let me real quick, when you were doing exercise 0 and configuring your dev space, that probably means you didn't add the HANA tools, the additional SAP extensions, or you had an existing dev space that didn't have them, and you need to go in and edit that dev space and add the HANA tools into it. That's the most likely thing that it could be. And I think, can you turn that view on and off? No, I don't think you can. Yeah, I was thinking that maybe the other option is that you turned that view off, but I think if the tool is installed into your space, I don't think you can turn that view off. Maybe it's in a check to make sure it's not just in a different order as well. They come in, you can drag them around and put them in a different spot here. All right, so continuing on, we've extended our SAP standard entity. So next, I want to add a context. It's a way of grouping content together. So I'm just going to create a TechEd common for reusable constructs. This is where I'm going to put all my reusable data types. So let's do this a little at a time. For instance, I have the ability to create elementary types. So I'm just defining a type, string 10. And then everywhere in my entities, I can reference business key as my type, and then it automatically inherit the technical settings that I've defined here. You can create types as enumerations. And what this is going to do is basically going to have a set of allowed values. And by putting this assert range true on if an Odata operation, it will automatically validate the incoming value against this enumeration. So very similar, once again, if you're an ABAP developer, this is similar to creating a data dictionary domain with a set of fixed values. Next, I'm going to start using these in some entities, but these are going to be, oh, I want to put that, sorry, I made a mistake there. I want that in my common. There we are. And now here, I'm going to create a complex amount type. Well, this is actually still a simple type, single decimal 15.2, but I'm also adding some annotations to it to tell it that it's going to have a currency code as well. It has a unit of measure attached to it. So we can start building up, we can use annotations to build semantics, data dictionary type semantics into the reusable element types as well. Next, I'm going to create abstract entities. So every time I create an entity, I can add this amount, and it will actually not just add one column, but we'll add 4 columns. These columns inherit from my reusable types. This one being an SAP standard one, this being one that I created. And then I go ahead and I annotate those. And when I do, I'm giving them descriptions, this title, but I'm not hard coding the English description in line here. I'm referencing the I18N properties and just using a key from the I18N properties. And then the cloud application programming model will pull in, depending on the logon language, the correct keyed description there. So I'm creating language dependent descriptions in this case. Okay. And now, just like I have an amount, I want to do the same thing with a quantity. There we are. Now, these are all abstract at this point. We haven't created anything that would really go into the database other than the inherited version of currencies, or extended version of currencies. But now we want to create our actual entities. So for that, I'm going to create a separate context. And come here. I create this TechEd purchase order context. And I'm going to start with a header entity. And let me go ahead and get the item entity in here, and then we can talk about it. Document. So what we have here is we have this header. It's going to be a purchase order header table, and it's going to be a managed entity. That is one of the things that we get from the cloud application programming model, which means it's going to add things like last changed by, last updated by. But it's going to put all that in automatically for us. It's actually going to have a key of a GUID. That's what the CUID has on it, which is also inherited. We don't even have to tell it that it's a key. It automatically makes it the key of the table. And then you see we're going to add in the amount, which the amount is this abstract entity. And what that's going to cause is these 4 columns to be stacked into our table. But we don't add it as like a structure here at the elemental level. We add it here at the entity definition that gets injected in. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. You know, we're using our types. But where this gets interesting, we've got our item entity. It's also keyed by CUID. It has an amount and it has a quantity. But what we have here is we have an association back to the headers that allows us to navigate from an item back to the header to get the details. But the header, I did not use an association. I used a composition of many. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to do deep insert, for instance. When I insert the header inside the data that I would send to the Odata service, I can send multiple items embedded inside there, and it will create those items as well. And I turn cascade all on, which means if I delete the purchase order header, it will automatically delete all items that are part of that composition. Now, obviously, there are times when you want an association. For instance, if I were to delete an item, I don't want it to delete the parent necessarily. So I would not want a composition, and I would not want to cascade that back the other way. That's why I use an association here. But if I'm going to perform a delete operation on a purchase order header, then I also want to remove all the items from the database as well. That's where the cascade and the composition comes into play. All right, I think that's the complete. I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe I'll stop here for a second, see if we've got questions. How are we doing here? Is there Rich, you're helping Christian. That's good. What's the difference between inheritance and aspect? Inheritance and aspect? I don't. They're not. They're completely different things. I'm not sure what you mean there. Inheritance and aspect. I guess I'll have to come back to that one. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I missed to add the additional extension to my dev space. Can I add them after the creation to the existing space? Have delete. You can add the additional extensions to an existing space. You do have to stop the space. So you would go back to the Business Application Studio main screen. You stop your dev space, and then the edit icon becomes available, and then you can choose any additional service features that you want. Will this be an Odata v4 then? Yes, this will be Odata v4, although if we have enough time, I'll also add Odata v2 into it as well. CAP supports both. But Odata v4 is the default out of the box. Different non-technical question. Is it possible to integrate conversational AI into a CAP project? I have no idea. I've never done a conversational AI. CAP is pretty open though, as we'll see potentially later in this exercise. Even if we don't get through it all today in the interactive session, you'll see we can pull third-party libraries into CAP. We can add custom handler endpoints. So I would have to imagine as long as you can do conversational AI from Node.js and hang it off an HTTP handler, then yes, you could integrate it into CAP. but I don't know enough about how conversational AI works to answer that definitively. But CAP itself is very, very open to other endpoints, custom handlers, things like that. Is there any plan for a webinar to understand how to make CAP projects a software as a service product service? Do you mean multi-tenancy there, I guess is the question. There is additional functionality for multi-tenancy, and there's been some good blog posts posted by SAP employee Andrew Lundy. I'd recommend that you check those out if you're interested in that topic. What's the difference between association and composition? I think I explained that at the end. I assume maybe that question came in before I explained that. If not, maybe ask a follow-up question there. There's an aspect keyword, which I can use with common objects instead of inherit. But I don't think I'm using inherit. So I'm not sure what you're referring to there, because I don't think inherit is a keyword. We've got extend, and basically I'm using these as aspects by just adding them into the definition of the entity itself. But I'm not sure what you mean by inherit. Is there any tutorial exercise on CI/CD pipeline with Hana Cloud or with HANA 2.0? I did a live stream on it last year, but I don't know of a specific tutorial that combines it with HANA Cloud. Okay, I think that puts me caught up. And I think we're at the point where we're ready to, we've got our new data model here. We're ready to do, no, I missed, there's one more step here. I want to create annotations as well. So I'm gonna, I notice you could create your annotations in your data model itself. I like to keep them separate. I just find that makes navigation a little cleaner, because a lot of times putting the annotations, particularly like I'm doing here, where there's a lot of field descriptions and stuff, it is a best practice to separate your annotations, to not put them in the entity definitions themselves, to say annotate the entity and then add the annotations. I chose to even go a step further here and put them in a completely separate file, which you can do. I like that. Like I said, I think it keeps your modeling a little cleaner if your annotations are separate from your definition. I can come here, I can read the pure definition, I can focus on the data types and the relationships and things like that. And then if I want to maintain the annotations, I got a completely separate place that I can clearly go to do that. But a little bit of matter of preference there. All right, so now the command line, if I do an npn run build, that's going to generate all these new entities, right? So now we've got a purchase order header, purchase order item entities. And if I send them into the database, npn run HANA, that's going to deploy it all into the HANA database. There we are. And if you're not a trusting soul, you can come back over to the Database Explorer, and we just refresh the tables view. Okay. Then you'll see, yes, we have currencies, we got headers, we got items. So we're good to go there. Now there's nothing in them yet. We wanna put some data in these tables. So what we can do with Cloud Application Programming Model is we don't need to create the HDB table data to map. We can just create a CSV file, as long as it has column headers that match, has like a header row that matches our target table column names. CDS will do all the matching automatically for us. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to create a new file here. And I'm going to cut and paste a lot of this so I don't mess up the names. But you have to give it the name, and notice I'm sap.common-currencies. So you have to include the namespace or the context here at the beginning, and then dash, and then the entity name. That's going to know, that's how CAP will know what CSV file what table to load the CSV file into. So there's our CSV. Let's just cut and paste the content. Now, this currencies table is actually language dependent, language keyed as well. And what we can do here, if we want to load language dependent versions, we can do that as well. This is a pretty cool little trick. We just create another file. It's the same base table name, and then you just do underscore text on the end. And all this stuff is driven by the special names, right? By putting an underscore text on the end of the name, that's going to tell CAP to load this into the language dependent portions of the table. And now we're going to have descriptions for German and French as well. And we'll see how that works here from the Odata service here in just a minute. Okay. What else do we need? We need purchase order data. Yeah, so let's grab headers. Let's create another file here for headers. There we are. New tab. Just be sure to do the raw view here so you can get a good cut and paste. I'll copy that all, and I will paste that into my headers file. There we are. And likewise, we want to do the items. Let's go ahead and grab items. Items. And go grab that data in the raw as well. Raw. Copy all that, put it in there, and we'll save it. And now what we can do here, build it again, because that will actually generate HDB table data load configuration files. And now we can do an npn run HANA. That's going to send it into the HANA database. There we go. 8 files into the HANA database. And now when we come to the Database Explorer and we look at the header, we do an open data. Now we have data. So now we got something to play with here, don't we? Because we've got some data. Now, one thing I want to show you while I'm in here, I want to look at this currencies. Now, notice we've got a currencies and we've got a currencies text table, but we only defined one entity. That one entity created 2 physical database tables behind the scenes. And this happened because we said that it was language keyed. So it needed to create a basic table, then it needed to create a whole separate table that has a locale or language key, and then has a separate name and description that can be stored for different languages. But what we're actually going to interact with, because we only define one entity, is a view. And this view got built for us by CAP automatically. It's using the coalesce command. And that allows us to basically select and say, well, look for the language specific version. And if you don't find it, fall back to the default description, which is English in the main table. So we get automatic fallback to the base language. And we see here, it's trying to look up the locale using the session context locale. So this is going to be set automatically by the cloud application programming model. Like when we do Odata services, we're not going to have to do anything to support the logon language, the checking of this. It's just going It's just going to happen automatically. We could also select against this view, and as long as you set the session context when you make the database connection, it's also going to use that logon language automatically when it processes this view as well. Okay. Alrighty. I think that takes us to the end. Yes, takes us to the end of exercise 2. So we've got a nice data model. We've explored some of the specific features of CAP modeling. We've seen what it does at the HANA database layer. Now we want to create our OData services as well. So let's actually close most of these windows. Now I'm going to switch over, instead of editing the DB CDS file, I'm going to switch to the SRV folder and the cat service CDS. And actually, let's go ahead and we're going to replace this whole thing. So we're going to tell it to read its data model from our DB folder. And that's basically what was there to begin with, even with the sample content. We're going to tell it we want to expose 2 entities, the header entity and the item entity. We don't need to redefine the associations, the compositions. And notice I don't even have to add currencies here. It is a dependent entity referenced in headers, and it will automatically be exposed in the OData service because of that. So if you were used to, say, doing excess OData development where you had to redefine your associations and explicitly state all the entities, this is much smarter. It's using a lot of what we did in the database modeling and reusing that automatically in the service modeling. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't add some of our own things. We could add additional associations at this point. We could do different entities. We could do entities on top of views. But if you want pretty much just to expose your data model, you see it's very simple here. I do add a description here with the title. And this is very important, OData draft enabled. We're going to turn on OData draft support, which is going to allow us to store a draft version, a temporary version of during editing when we use Fiori. Say, for instance, I'm in the middle of creating a purchase order, and I go to lunch, and I'm not ready to persist it to the database and actually save my purchase order. We'll save a draft version, which doesn't go into the main table, but is stored like in a temporary table off to the side, and later I can resume editing. And this is actually going to generate a whole new set of tables in the database. But we don't have to model any of that. We don't have to manage any of the moving from the draft to the main table or anything like that. Simply by adding this one annotation, and I only have to add it to the header here, and the item will automatically inherit it through the composition. As I say, I want draft enabled, and boom, I get it out of the box. All right. Let me make sure, is there anything else I need to do here? No, that's it. We're ready to create OData v4 services. This is all we need to do to expose our data model as OData v4. Let me just do an npn run build to compile the new services. And if you notice here, there's a whole bunch of new catalog service entities being created in the database. Just by creating the OData service, it does generate HANA views to support it behind the scenes. We also see the draft administration data is being generated. So it does mean, even though we didn't change our data model, we need to deploy this into the database. So when you change your services, it's always a good idea to go ahead and do a database deployment right afterwards as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do an npn run HANA to deploy that into the database, and that will send all the supporting views underneath the OData services into the database as well. All right, we're ready to test our OData service. So I can just do an npn start, and that's going to do our CDS run. It is connecting to the database. uses that same configuration that was created when we do a deploy to also know how to connect to the database at runtime. And then it's listening on localhost. But one of the nice things about the Business Application Studio is if I want to test that, I can just say open a new tab. And there we are. We've got a URL endpoint temporarily created that points to our running service that's just running here in the console. I didn't have to deploy anything to Cloud Foundry. I have not deployed anything to Cloud Foundry. I'm running this completely temporarily in my local console. So I don't need any application runtime services. I don't have to wait while anything deploys. It's very fast. I can change things, stop and start it. For instance, I can just stop it. I can restart it. Boom, it starts right back up. So much nicer experience than what you get with the old Web IDE. Now, if you forget your services here, say I close that and I'm like, oh darn, I want to open that again. All you have to do is come up here to Command and say Ports and Preview, and it's going to show you all of your exposed services. And you see this one is active, cap running on 4004. And when you click that, it opens again. So I know that's a common thing that people accidentally close that little window in the corner and then they're not sure how to get to testing it again. Now that we've got the test tool up here, what you see, and this might look a little different than my screenshots because they've updated this to support dark mode. If your OS is running in dark mode, which mine is, then the test tool runs in dark mode as well. So don't be alarmed if it looks a little different than the screenshots. But we have the ability to come here and we can see our metadata for our OData service. There's my metadata. I know it's OData v4 because right there, version of the metadata is v4. We have the ability, oh, yeah, I want to show you while I'm in here as well. You know, all those annotations that we added, they are all in here as well. If I scroll down, like common labels, descriptions, that's all coming in here via annotations. So we don't need a separate annotation file. I don't need to load those annotations, use the annotation editor, like the Fiori annotation editor. I've modeled it all in CAP, and CAP's going to expose it all via its single OData endpoint here. Okay. What else do I want to show you while I'm in here? Oh yeah, let's look at the currencies. So if you just click on one of the entities, it's going to show you the data in JSON format. So here we see our currencies. Notice the recent versions of CAP now also automatically put a top 11, which I really like, because if you have an entity with a lot of data, it used to be, I'd forget, you know, load it up and then, oh, gotta wait for it to all load. And then it had a top to deal with it, but now it adds the top automatically. That's really good. But come here to our currencies. Remember, this is our language dependent version and it's showing us English automatically. Let me show you what we can do here. I'll just come to my web browser and I'm gonna change my language settings. And I'm gonna make German my primary language. And then I'm just gonna refresh. Now watch here, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Canadian dollar. Oh, that's interesting. I think that description loaded wrong. I must have it wrong in my CSV file. Okay, but never mind that. Notice that it's all English. That's mainly what I want you to pay attention to. And now refresh this, and now it's all in German. I didn't change anything other than my browser setting, so that the browser reports when it makes a request to the server that it's now wants German, and that's what it loaded. Let's try Japanese. Now, I didn't load any data for Japanese. So now when I come here and I refresh with Japanese, it falls back to English. It doesn't give me blank. It goes back to the default language, which was English. Okay. Now let's change this back to English so I don't accidentally get something I can't read. All right. That we've seen the purchase order. I did look at the purchase order header. you notice it's got all these extra columns in here that we didn't model in. The created at, created by, modified at, modified by. These are the, this is the managed that's adding this. And these get filled in automatically, updated automatically by CAP if I were to edit these. Okay. Finally, you'll see here that we can go to our Fiori preview. And you'll see we can already get a pretty basic Fiori UI once it loads up. But we don't have enough annotations yet for anything to load by default, right? So we haven't like told it what to appear on the overview page and what to appear on the list page. We'll come back and we'll add annotations for that in just a minute. Okay. Let me pause for a second and see any questions. No, we seem to be pretty caught up there on questions. Okay. Well, I'll push on to the next exercise. The first exercise was OData v4, which is what you get by default. But I want to show you how easy it is now to add OData v2 if you need it for backwards compatibility. And we'll have a single service that will support both OData v2 and v4. And we don't need to create a separate service or have a separate endpoint. So what I want to do is I just need to add another dependency in my package JSON because the OData v2 is added as another module. So it's an SAP managed module, CDS, OData, there it is, v2 proxy adapter. I'm just gonna wildcard that. I can save that, and then I need to load that dependency. So I just need to do an Npn install, and that will download that dependency from the internet. All right, that's simple enough. So now I've got the v2 adapter proxy as part of my project. Now to add it into my service, I need to create a file named, and this is where, like, once again, the magical naming is important. I must name it server.js. Okay. That tells CAP, if it sees a file named server.js, it knows I want to do custom bootstrapping of my service. It's going to allow me to run logic that will override or enhance the startup, the standard startup of the OData service framework when CAP starts. And all I want to do here, you don't want to watch me type, so let me cut and paste this. But I'll explain to you what we're putting in here. All I'm doing is I'm loading the CDS library module so I can reference it. I'm loading the v2 adapter, and I'm hooking into an event handler. I'm telling CDS, when you start up on Bootstrap, please run this proxy and add it into your app. App is the web server that is running within the cloud application programming model. And then we just export that out. That's it. That's all we have to do. And with that, we have added OData v2 to our service as well. And I can prove this to you if I come here to the command line, do npn start. And actually, if we look in the log, you're already going to see some new things here. You're going to see proxy created running on the same host and port, and that we have a rewrite rule that will redirect. If I add /v2 to the URL, into the URL, it'll redirect back to the v4 internally. So in order to see this, let me just close a couple other windows. Just open that up. Once again, if I go to my metadata document, if I just come here, this is the v4 version of the metadata. But if I just add v2 into the path, now it's OData v2. And same thing with the entities. If I were to hit, say, currencies again, there's currencies. If I just add into the URL v2, there's the v2 version, different JSON layout. So from a single service, from a single endpoint, we can support both v2 and v4. Don't need to deploy a second service, don't need to do a bunch of extra configuration. Really clean, really simple now. Maybe you've got some older UI5 applications, you don't want to convert them to the latest Fiori tools. You can still, from the single service, hit the Odata v2 endpoint. I think that's a pretty nice addition there. Okay, I don't see anything in the new questions in the chat. Let's forge on. We've only got 15 minutes left, but I think we can still get a lot done here. This next step, I actually want to add a custom handler. We have exits. We can have before, we can have after, and we can have override exits on all the OData operations. So we get tons of functionality out of the box. We get deep insert, we get draft support. Maybe I want to do something custom when, say, a new record is created, or even when it's read, I can add additional columns. I can calculate my own columns. And to do this, once again, we need a little magical name mapping. If you take the name of your service, which mine is cat-service, and we create another file with the same name, cat-service, and we just make the file extension JS instead of CDS, then Cloud Application Programming Model will also automatically load this and use it as your exit handler class. So what we want to do here, let me get my code again, is we want to add.
I think you named that file wrong.
Cat server. You're right, I did. Good catch. Thanks, Rich. Rename. Cat service. There we are. There we are. So what we want to do is every time we read the PO headers, so this after, we're going to do an after exit for every record that is read. That's what the each command says. It's a read operation, one row at a time. We're going to get each row, and we're just going to do a console log, just to prove that the exit handler is working. So let's go ahead and run that now. And you'll see here, it started the catalog service, and there's our exit handler. I know it's hooked our exit handler because it's added to the log. And now when I come back here, what did I say? PO headers. So let's just go query PO headers. All right. And there it is. It just logged out the key of each record that it read. Now, that's just to sort of prove to you that this works. Now that we have this working, let's do something actually useful with this exit. I'm going to replace this whole logic here. Because what am I going to do? I'm going to leave this in here for now, this after each, but I'm going to add another exit handler after any create, update, or delete operation on PO headers. Then I'm going to want to run this logic. So you're seeing I can chain multiple actions together. I can chain multiple entities together here. If I could do the same thing here, I can add another entity. And this could be a before, an after, or an on, and override it as well. But all I want to do here, I want to do an after. I still want the standard functionality to take care of the insert into the database or the update or the delete. But if it's successful, then I want to emit an event. And if my application is connected to enterprise messaging, this will automatically broadcast this event on the message bus. And this is where CAP makes this so easy. All I have to do is, this represents CDS, the Cloud Application Programming Model Framework. And I'm just saying emit the name of the event and then any data that I want to send along with it on the event handler. So easy to raise events. So let's see this in action now. Just stop my service and restart it to pick up the new event handler. And now we do a create, update, delete. And of course, I'd have to go into Fiori preview. I think we might have to come back to this because I don't think we're going to have enough of a UI. We're not going to have enough of a UI to do a create, update, delete. But we'll see this in a minute once we add our UI. Okay. Oh, there's a good question here. I'm using npn start, but I use npn run build. What does run imply? What I have is if I have three scripts here: start, build, and Hana. Start is the default. So I can just say npn start and I can leave off the run command. I could also say npn run start, but start is the default script, and therefore I don't have to tell it to run the script. For any other script not named start, you have to add the run command. So I have to say npn run build or npn run Hana. That's why the difference there. Yeah. Could you still show the export to zip now? Our project is fairly large. Yeah, I think I can. Yeah. File download. I know. Let's select the file. Where is the export? Oh, I know what. Yeah. If you select multiple files, and this is a little wonky because you want to export the whole project, right? Which probably means that in the Explorer you need to open the projects folder so you can see them at the project level, because I can't trigger this at the project level. But as soon as I select multiple files and I say download, then it's automatically going to zip them together. Yeah. But you're right. It's a little tricky to do it at the project level. But what I would have to do is I'd have to say file, open folder, and instead of opening the project folder specifically, open. See, these are all in home user projects. And if I would just go up to the projects level and open that, then I would see all my projects in the Explorer, and I could select just the project folder, and I could say download, and then it would do a zip download of the whole project. Hopefully that answers your question there. Is there a project? Yeah. Is someone suggesting that there's a project view download? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that is. I don't know if somebody's suggesting that that's an alternative or asking if that is. CAP will work with on-premise HANA XS also. Yes. Is there a way to call ABAP objects from ABAP stack? Well, you can call ABAP OData services from CAP. And if you're interested in that, the developer keynote that we did, get that, shows exactly that process of calling OData services from an ABAP stack. We use an S4 cloud system in CAP, and how you generate proxy objects for those using the cloud SDK that's embedded inside to CAP. So if you're interested in that topic, I just put that in the chat there. Does your MTA YAML have all the details on the DB autofilled and ready to deploy to Cloud Foundry? Yes, it does. If you see here, now the wizard initially generated an MTA YAML, and it's got the proper dependencies to the database module and everything. But beyond the wizard generation, if I would add, say, a new container instance, if I use the HANA projects view, that's where it's nice. It will also edit the MTA YAML. If I do it by hand, then I would also have to add it by hand to the MTA YAML. But that's where, once we get the kind of the weird stuff worked out, where the HANA project view doesn't work great with CAP and vice versa, it'd be really nice, because when I come here to the HANA projects view and I say add database connection, that will also edit the MTA YAML and add it in there as well. Which would be the best strategy to fetch and join data from an S4 HANA on-premise system into this application? Once again, it depends. What's the volume of data? You know, are you like loading some additional data? Like we're loading purchase orders here, and for each purchase order, you wanted to go grab some business partner details, then I would do an OData call. You know, just like we did in the developer keynote. That's exactly the kind of scenario that we did in the developer keynote. If you said, oh, I want to create a calculation view on top of all purchase orders though, and that's in the S4 on-premise system, then no, I wouldn't do an OData service on top of that. I'd look at, you know, replicating that data into the cloud or using SDI or something like that to read it in mass. Okay. Is SAP Future plan to do all development in SAP Application Studio instead of Eclipse? Most development tools have moved into the Business Application Studio. Certainly CAP, HANA, mobile development, Fiori development, they're all in the Business Application Studio. But I'm sure, since you mentioned Eclipse, you're talking about ABAP. And there are no plans at this time to move ABAP development out of Eclipse and into the Business Application Studio. Oh yeah, okay. I see Rich answered there. I should have read down. Yeah. Okay. All right. We've got just a couple minutes left, which actually I think is enough to pretty much finish up the user interface. Because in order to get a nice Fiori user interface, all we really need are annotations. So I'm going to go back here. Where did I say to put? Okay, I'm going to put this in the SRV folder, and I'm going to create another CDS file to once again allow me to add annotations. And let me get all this copied in here. So what I'm saying is I want to pull in the catalog service. I want to pull in the items, but I haven't created the annotations for the items yet. That's why I'm getting an error marker here. We'll create that in a second. But I want to define things about how it's going to work in Fiori. I want to say, well, if it's a Fiori list report, then these are the columns that I want. And I want them sorted this way. You know, so we're defining like our display variants for different use cases. So anytime PO header is used in a list line item, these are the columns that I want. When it's used in an object page, this is how I want the layout to be. And we've got the ability to do things, you know, like set read only and you know, group things differently. But let's go ahead and at least get the basic stuff in here so we can see it in Fiori, since we're almost out of time. So let's create the item one as well. It's going to be record time. There's our item. Let's put that in there. There we go. I don't like having that there. Now it's happy. There we are. And just by adding these two annotation files, which are going to layer more annotations into our metadata document, what we're able to do now, oh, I'm not in my folder, am I? CDAT1601 build. There. Start. And let's go ahead and open that. If we were to look at our metadata document, we would see it's much larger now because it's got all these additional annotations. They're down here towards the bottom. Yeah, for the additional layouts here. Field groups, the detail field group, importance high. But for the most part, we don't have to worry about that. And we added the annotations in. Now when we do the Fiori preview, remember earlier, it didn't show us anything. Even when I hit run, I didn't get anything. But now when I say go, I've got 4 columns. And these are being set by the annotations. I told it which 4 columns to display in my list. And likewise here, I can go into an item here, and I define via the annotations which fields I want at the header, which fields I want to show at the item level. And I have the ability to come in here and edit. First of all, that amount, 48. And notice saving draft. Okay, I haven't hit save, but I changed that data. And now if I just back out here and I say, show me my drafts, I can see this one record, and I can go back and I can continue editing. But that hasn't been updated for anybody else because it hasn't been persisted into the main database table. But at this point, I can continue editing, and I can finally say, save that. Now it's persisted. The draft no longer exists. Yeah, no more drafts for me. But now anybody else that looked at that record would see the updated amount. We also see, yes, all the reads, but remember that event handler that we put in there, or that event being raised, emitting PO change. So it sent that out to the event bus. It just raised the event that a PO had been changed and gave us the key of the purchase order that had been changed. So what we see here is, with a little bit of annotations, we've got a pretty full-fledged Fiori application. The only thing that we ran out of time, that we didn't have to go through it, it's like, oh, we're so close to being done. Another 5 minutes probably, we would have gotten all the way to the end. But of course, you can finish it now. Is I use the Fiori tools to generate a full Fiori application. And it isn't going to look any different than the test application because it's all driven by the annotations, but it does show you how to then persist that into your project. And it's basically, you're just, running a command cap create UI, or you can right mouse click. I could come here on the service and say create UI, and it's just going to start a wizard. Yes, I want to create a Fiori application. And then I'm going to be able to choose Fiori Elements or Freestyle. I want Fiori Elements. I think if I choose Freestyle, there's your master detail one somebody was asking about earlier, but you got to switch to the Freestyle to get that. But if I choose Fiori Elements and object page, list report object page, next I would choose my data sources. This now lets you just point to your local CAP project, so I don't have to download the metadata or anything like that. I say what folder I want to put this in. I just want to tell it to target this into the app folder here. Oh, no, I want to tell it to go into the project. Sorry. Choose the service if you have more than one. Choose your base entity, headers. It knows the items are a navigation because it's reading the metadata already. And now's where I could generate the rest of this. I won't complete since we're out of time, but you can walk through the rest of the exercise. This is going to generate the Fiori application, and you can tweak it a little if you want, but it will be part of your application, not just the preview from CAP, but a full Fiori application that you can deploy along with the rest of your whole project. With that, 1 minute over, I'm afraid, but that brings us to the end of the workshop. We've been answering a lot of questions as we go. I can stay over a minute or two if there are any additional questions. Christian asked one question I might have missed when mentioned. What part of the architecture takes care of locking a database entry when a user calls the screen to edit the entity in a CAP application? There is no locking. I mean, that's part of the draft application, and it's optimistic locking in that it doesn't, we don't have a lock on the database. That way 2 users can edit the same object at the same time. The second user would using e-tags, we would know that there had been other changes. We would persist it automatically as a draft, and then it would give them the option to merge their draft changes into the newly edited object. So draft is the main way that SAP handles that in a stateless, non-locking manner. It's the same way that wrap, the same approach that wrap uses to this as well. All right, I see. Thanks. I don't see any other questions. Oh, wait, one just came in. Hi, Thomas. On top of this project, can you add XSUAA with user credentials? Yes, you can add user credentials. I did a, did I do a blog post or did I do a video on that just the other day? And I'm writing a tutorial that's going to include UAA as well. It's not part of this workshop just because there's just not enough time to do it in 2 hours. But I have some other content that shows you how to also add the XSUAA to this as well. Run the app router in the console to do local testing of the security. So yeah, that's all very possible, and I have some other content out there that shows you that. Okay, last call for any questions before we close out, since we are a couple minutes over time. If not, Julia, if there's the last slide that you want to share, I can stop my sharing.
Yes. So thank you, Thomas and Rich, for the great session. Don't forget to visit the SAP community and follow the SAP TechEd tag and the SAP HANA Cloud tag for more information and to stay up to date. So thank you all for joining and have a great rest of the day. Thanks a lot. Bye.